So lately, there have been a lot of discussions and conversations about transgenderism on the internet. A lot of people will accept the concept, whether it be biologically or socially, and a lot of us just don't understand, So in this video, there's going to be a discussion about the dark history of transgenderism. Hopefully, it makes any sense that correlates to what we are all thinking, or it helps us accept a new perspective. But in any case, we're going to check it out. So without wasting your time, let's get to it.
Okay, well, let's look at it from a historical perspective. Where did this come from within the medical field? Let's look at it from philosophically, from Marxism, the role there, and second wave feminism. Let's look at it from a contemporary way of social media and what's called rapid onset gender dysphoria. Let's look at the different origins instead of saying that's the fault of it. And so you can look at it from a medical perspective. People say, oh, it's the sexual revolution. It's 1960s. Like, no, this was way underway before the 1960s. And when I started to trace it back, people are like, oh, it's Dr. John Money. Okay, where did he get his stuff from? Well, Harry Benjamin. Well, where did he get his stuff from? Well, Magnus Hirschfeld. And you start going back, there was this guy, Magnus Hirschfeld, who was in Berlin, Germany, and he ran this Institute for Sexual Science. This place was creepy. I mean, this guy was really out there. He had a museum of sexual torture devices there. The woman of the house was a man 30 years younger than him that he had sexual relations with, that later committed suicide. And this is the guy that first started doing these sex reassignment surgeries in 1920. Wow. He started with castration of a male.
Oh my.
I think by 22, he gave a double mastectomy to a woman. By 1930, he tried to give a man a false vagina. And so what ended up happening to that man is he died 14 months later after an abyss of suffering. And while all this stuff was going on, there was an American by the name of Dr. Harry Benjamin. And he heard about this Magnus Hirschfeld fellow. And he said, I want you to come out to do a speaking tour in the United States. And so while that patient was dying of this gender reassignment surgery, this guy, Magnus Hirschfeld, was welcomed into America as like the Einstein of sex. And he started this lecture tour. Now, Harry Benjamin became interested in this whole subject by a guy named Alfred Kinsey, who introduced him to a man who identified as transsexual. So Harry Benjamin wanted the surgeries that Magnus Hirschfeld was performing over in Germany to be more accessible in America. Because if you wanted one of these surgeries in America, you had to fly to like Casablanca to a doctor out there who would do these things. And so he said, I want to make these more accessible here. So let's start a research team here. So Dr. Harry Benjamin started this foundation that later became WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. This is now considered kind of the gold standard of the standards of care for transgender individuals today. But this guy, Harry Benjamin, is the one who started this thing. And he said, well, I need to get a research team together. And one of the guys on the research team was Dr. John Money. And so Dr. John Money was working with Harry Benjamin after Magnus Hirschfeld came and did this tour of all his like science experiments he was doing, hailed as the Einstein of sex. And then you've got Dr. John Money coming into the picture.
Einstein.
More people are familiar with him because of the good work of Matt Walsh. Dr. John Money, just to
the good work of Matt Walsh.
Set the table for this guy. This guy identified as a polyamorous, bisexual nudist who thought that pornography could be helpful to marriage, endorsed pedophilia, and believed that many wives think that it's good when the husband has an incestuous relationship with their children because it relieves her of the burden of needing to be the full sexual...
Who does this kind of research? Like, what are you thinking? Shouldn't you be a psychopath to go down this rabbit hole? In fact, not even a rabbit hole. Rabbit hole is too holy for me to even say down that rabbit hole. Like, what are you thinking? Goodness me.
Outlet for the male and distributes that among the children. This is Dr. John Money. This is the guy we're talking about as kind of the godfather here in the States of this transgender movement. And so he was not a scientist. This guy's a psychologist, and he was fascinated with cases of ambiguous genitalia at birth. And how do we raise these kids, male or female? And they realize it's a lot easier to destroy an incompletely developed penis than it is to construct one. And so they typically would take boys who have ambiguous genitalia and castrate the boys. And then he said, well, maybe we can just raise these as girls. And they started doing these different types of experiments. And then the perfect opportunity...
On human beings. Not lab rats, guys. Human beings.
came across his path, which was this family, John and Janet Reimer, had a little boy. I think it was 1965. They had twins, Bruce and Brian. And then when the babies were about 8 months old, they suffered something called phimosis, which is a condition where it's very difficult for the kid to urinate. You go to the pediatric doctor and he says, oh, well, you need to give him, a circumcision and that should ease things up. So they schedule the appointment to go in. And apparently the doctor used a circumcision tool that involved like an electric shock. So what it would do is it would cauterize the wound to keep it from bleeding too much. And apparently there's some big mishap that happened during the cauterization surgery of Bruce's circumcision, and the penis was destroyed. And the parents obviously traumatized. They canceled Brian's surgery, and then his phimosis just resolved on its own. So the whole thing was unnecessary to begin with. And they go home just traumatized with a little 8-month-old boy with a destroyed penis. And they're like, what do we do with this poor boy? And one night they're up watching TV, and they see this Dr. John Money on a TV show just hailing the progress being made at Johns Hopkins Hospital with these new ways that, girls, are identifying as boys and being raised in this way because gender roles. And this is the first time it was ever used in like 1955. He's talking about that stuff in his research papers, that we can raise boys because these are just social constructs.
Gender, when did this word come into play?
Well, the first time we find it in the English language is in the 1400s, exclusively with grammar, that known as masculine, feminine, or neuter. And the 15th century, it started to be used as synonymous with sex, but predominantly it was always in terms of grammar. And so that's the way it always was. In fact, there's no record of it in the medical literature before 1955, when Dr. John Money introduced the term gender roles. And so that's the first place it shows up.
A lot of people are not going to accept this. As a matter of fact, with all the backings and all the information he's given, a lot of people are still going to say he's wrong. But I mean, you can say he's wrong. Tell me why, though. I want to hear the reasons why he might be wrong,
Anywhere on the radar. Today, it's a really problematic word, in my opinion, because it's so extraordinarily vague. I mean, we've got gender reveal parties. Okay, what are we revealing? Biological sex. Okay, but it's a gender reveal party? I thought gender was your internal sense of identity. Like, the meanings can be so different when people have a conversation. It creates a lot of confusion. So it's better to speak of sex and sexual identity than gender, which can have so many different meanings. And so, but he was promoting this idea that gender isn't just distinct from sex, it can be divorced completely from it. And so he thought this is the perfect match control. I've got a twin set. When this one, we can just castrate the kid. And he talked the parents into that just before Bruce turned 2 years old, was castrated. And he said, look, he's going to be raised a perfectly healthy woman. She won't be able to have kids. She won't be able to have kids, but we're going to put him in dresses and change the name to Brenda, and he will be attracted to males and live a happy married life, and you'll just see it'll go great. It did not go great. I mean, they gave this little girl, boy, a jump rope, and he said the only thing I need that for is to tie people up and whip them with it. They gave him a sewing machine, and he disassembled it to see how the thing worked. He was not interested at all. And growing up in like grade school, the kids teased him like, you're a gorilla. Like, what are you? Because he's in a dress, but he's all guy, and he'd get in fist fights with the other kids. And I mean, the anxiety, the depression, the mother turned to infidelity and alcoholism. I mean, the whole family was imploding. While meanwhile, Dr. Money was seeing the boys every year and molesting the kids and saying, okay, now you need to act out these sexual things, and I'll take pictures because it's important that you learn your gender roles, and like really messed up crap. So by the time the poor boy, Bruce Reimer, Brenda, was like 13 years old. Like, he was refusing, like, I would refuse to see that man. And on the last visit, I mean, he totally had a nervous breakdown and tried to run away because Dr. Money was trying to introduce him to a man who identified as female. And then eventually the dad broke down and told him the truth for the first time. And Bruce's first question was, what was my name? He told him his name, and then Bruce ended up changing his name to David, and in memory of David defeating this Goliath, that this won't be the end of me. Wow. And then he found out that his case was being used all over the country by Dr. John Money in these academic forums of like, this has been a great success, and he's just transitioning to a mother hen, and this was being hailed, and feminists were like, hey, look at this, gender is a social construct. Women don't have to be relegated to domestic duties because these are just cultural impositions. Men and women are the same, and this was all flowing out of his pseudoscience, and it had a tragic ending. His brother died. He ended up committing suicide himself. He got married adopted a couple kids and took his own life. David did. But thankfully, before he passed away, he was able to become an advocate for this. He was on the Oprah Winfrey show.
How did he have a couple of kids if he didn't have a penis?
Adoption. Yeah. So he adopted the kids.
That's a good question. I'm sure the guy was curious.
Sorry, Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah, Oprah Winfrey had him on, and he explained this harrowing thing he went through, and how many other kids started coming out of the woodworks after that. Like, Dr. Money did the same thing to me, And so this guy, and he said, David unfortunately was lost to follow up, so I'm not quite sure what happened to him. He knew exactly what was going on.
That was pretty interesting, So when you see people like Matt Walsh and Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro speaking up against this thing, especially for minors, people always call them villains. People always hate on them. But you see where it's coming from. You have to understand this history before you choose. As an adult, whatever you want to do to yourself, whatever you want to do in life, long as it doesn't hurt me or hurt the people around you or your society, you might as well. You're free to make your own decisions. But as far as children, see all this I think the youngest was 2 years old. The youngest case of transgenderism was 2 years old. That one cannot even think for himself yet, or his or herself, whatever the gender was. Couldn't even think. And then this is just, I don't know, man. I don't know how to process this thing. And as I'm talking, I feel sad even speaking on this, because we shouldn't be addressing this kind of topics right now. We shouldn't be addressing it, And the man even appeared on Oprah Winfrey show and spoke against it, but people still wouldn't listen. How do you want people to say it again? What tone? I was saying that this is from a place of love. When you see people acting all concerned and speaking up against it, it's not from a place of hate. It's from a place of love. But the reception is always like, oh, you're transphobic, or you hate these people, or you do this, you do that. No. It's from a place of love. It's like, think about it, research a little bit. And if you still feel the same way, okay, go ahead and do it. But at least think about it and just let me know your thoughts on that video, man. If you want us to check out another one by, let me see the name of the channel, Pines with Aquinas. I'll put a link to the original channel so you can go check them out. But I feel like that was a great video, quite educative. So please feel free to go give them a like and, say something to them in the comment section. Smash the like button while you're here, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Have a wonderful day. Peace.